There you stood, right beside me, taking me in your arms of love and care. And now where would I be without you? Where would I be, Mother? You spoke in the silence, calling me from dark to light, standing always behind me. You are my rescue story, carrying me over mountains, guiding my soul from death to life, lifting me from ashes to glory. You are my rescue story, and you are my rescue story. You were holding my hands when I was drowning in the pain, standing crying in the rain. Oh, you sing sweet songs of liberation, and every time I see your face, all my darkness fades away. And now where would I be without you? Where would I be, Mother? You speak in the silence, calling me from dark to light, standing always behind me. You are my rescue story, carrying me over mountains, guiding my soul from death to life, lifting me from ashes to glory. You are my rescue story. Oh, you never let go of me. You never let go of me. You are my testimony. Oh, you never let go of me. You never let go of me. This is my testimony. Oh, you speak in the silence, calling me from dark to light, standing always behind me. You are my rescue story, carrying me over mountains, guiding my soul from death to life, lifting me from ashes to glory. You are my rescue story, and you are my rescue story. Oh, you never let go of me. You never let go of me. You are my testimony. Oh, you never let go of me. You will never let go of me. Oh, you never let go of me. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you, Preeti. That was absolutely appropriate and lovely, as usual. From the Gita, chapter 2, verses 28 and 30. Avyaktadhadini bhutani vyakta madhyani bharata avyakta nidhananevya tatra ka paridevana dehi nityam avadhyoyam dehe sarvasya bharata tasmat sarvani bhutani natvam shochitumarhasi. Beings are such that their beginnings are unmanifest, their middles are manifest, and their ends are unmanifest again. What complaint can there be about this? This, the embodied one, is eternally inviolable in the body of all. Therefore, you should not mourn for any being. I have to admit, I've been using PowerPoints a lot lately. I feel a little bit naked up here. And I also want to mention that we have a totally unpacked audience today, which is fantastic.
We have the audience online.
Yes, exactly. So As Preeti was saying, we have a story. We each have a story. So today is all the value of stories. Storytelling is the oldest of all the arts. It's known as the art of immersion. Storytelling invites conversation, captivates attention, inspires the imagination, and captures hearts. In many cultures, storytelling was a sacred ceremony and followed certain protocols. Only certain people were allowed to tell certain stories because they had obtained them in prescribed ways and were recognized by their people as being the custodians of that story. Repetition is one feature that lent a certain cadence to the tale until actual poeticizing became the highest standard in some cultures. Often stories are acted out with gestures, etc., which became precursors to theatrical performances that had many actors, which again told a story. In the earliest days, stories were told around a campfire, which was usually an evening occurrence, something to take the children's mind off of the descending cold or prowling predators. One of the most important roles of an elder was to impart the stories that defined their people and provide continuity from generation to generation. Gather around, the storyteller would invite the youngsters. They would congregate in a circle, ready to become absorbed. Then later, they might reenact these stories in their play. Eventually, epics evolved. Even nowadays, we experience epics as engrossing and thrilling. You don't want it to end. You really don't. You get addicted. I think stories are like the first addiction, that like we're born with the propensity to get addicted to stories. When it does end, you feel a certain vacancy. For example, if you watch the Mahabharata video series, which goes on for 100 hours or something like that. Not quite. With its moral lessons. Or the 1001 Arabian Nights with cliffhangers night after night as Scheherazade avoids decapitation again and the king falls gradually in love with her. Or Star Trek with its various spin-offs that carry the space-time psychological exploration of the galaxy forward. Then there's this neat trick where you have stories within stories, like in the Yoga Vasishtha, or in the film Inception, which was actually dreams within dreams, but the same thing. Finally, we tell stories about how God became human, a special human, someone endowed with special powers, most notably the ability, many say the mission, to remind us of our divine origin. Some children take this story to heart and pursue a religious vocation when they mature, but the majority view these stories more as fantasy, without relevance to their lives, and so relegate it to the attic of their minds. To briefly outline the characteristics of great stories, there are about 6 or 7 here, is they're universal. They have appeal across cultures. That doesn't matter. Secondly, they have a clear structure and a purpose. Usually there's a character to root for, usually an unexpected hero, although sometimes it's a, actual swashbuckling hero. They appeal to our deepest emotions. The best thing about them is that there's some surprise, something unexpected that happens. And they're usually very simple and focused. Today we would say it's written tightly, okay? Nothing extraneous. There's a satisfying conclusion. People like to hear stories that have a beginning, a middle, and an end. We desire to be drawn into the story and enjoy when a story builds up to a thrilling climax followed by a satisfying conclusion. If you've noticed, even TED Talks nowadays, which are usually on academic subjects or scientific, are always constructed as stories, demonstrating that story enables us to pass on technology and wisdom both. So we see that stories both root us to the earth and lift us up. They are part of what builds up a healthy ego. At the risk of making too much of a generalization, it seems to me that groundless people tend to feel more lost and purposeless than those who have strong connections to the stories of their forebears. Now, since today we're talking about the value of stories, today I'm going to set aside the frequent use of the word valuation when it implies judgment. We could talk about various types of value systems, what qualities that cultures have highlighted as desirable or undesirable. We can talk about that another time. But today, I want to simply take the word value as meaning to cherish, to hold dear, or to treasure. For example, what do we do when we newly meet a devotee we've never met before? We almost always establish who our initiating guru was and share stories about him or her. Or we try to find a connection through some other well-known sadhu in our order. I used to think that this was all rather tedious. And then I realized that this process actually confirms that a bond existed between us even before we knew it. So from our tradition, the following are some of the touchstones that we talk about. Incidents from Ramakrishna's life, specifically as they may relate to some spiritual or moral lesson for us. Simple parables of Ramakrishna that explain difficult philosophical points in a very simple way that a child can understand. We have stories of the direct disciples via our oral tradition and how they acted in certain situations, which are intended to be sort of a template for us to, if not follow, at least be aware of and try and emulate at some point in our lives. And nowadays we have some newly discovered tales of Holy Mother, some of which have been available only in Bengali language previously and are now coming out. So these things we find very exciting when they become available to us. Through a process that psychologists call narrative transport, good stories engage listeners emotionally. Engaged emotions create empathy with the speaker. We know this much. People want to be immersed. They want to get involved in a story. It allows the listeners to use their imagination. Now, notice that our imagination has become less engaged as our media have evolved to more literal methods. So oral methods, storytelling, and reading, because they are linear, they give us, as the listener or the receiver, time to construct our own pictures. Radio provides audio clues, but we still provide the visual. And finally, TV or movies, where everything is served up for you. The scripts used to be written, I don't know if you noticed, but if you watch some movies like from the 1940s or something, 30s and 40s, the scripts used to be written to give our own brains latitude to fill in the blanks. But that doesn't happen much anymore. I mean, they would always like cut, go to the next frame, and you're like, I know what happened. Okay. But that doesn't happen anymore. Everything is very literal. It's like right there for us. Therefore, these methods, the media, I should say, is not as satisfying as our own built-in imagined grasp of the story. I suspect that virtual reality is equally literal, I imagine, since it's programmed, it's part of a computer. So now, interestingly, stories actually light up more of our brain than factual information, and light up is literal. because there are fMRI studies that have proved our brains become more engaged and respond better to storytelling than to straight data and facts. That's because a good story activates areas in the brain that allow the listener to turn the story into their own ideas and experiences. This is a phenomenon known as neural coupling. Fundamentally, the hearer's neurons fire in exactly the same pattern as the speaker's neurons. In other words, the brain responds to the story events as if they were actually happening to the listener. These fMRI studies only confirm what we have already known. For example, at one point in the West, Swami Vivekananda, as he was speaking publicly, knew that the link between his audience and himself was so strong that he did not want to be tempted to misuse its power, so he left the stage in the middle of his talk. He knew he had them, right there. Let me reiterate. Our brains don't process any real distinction between a story or experience we hear or read about and one that actually happened to us. So, for instance, we hear stories nowadays of, brutality, police brutality, or various other kinds of things that are happening in the news. And sometimes you feel it. You actually feel it as if it were happening to yourself. On a more positive note, successful athletes, for example, spend time in pure visualization of successful performance. They're not actually doing it, they're just visualizing it. This is also why we have to be very careful about the stories we tell ourselves, because we create our own self-fulfilling prophecy. So, for example, look at the mental gulf between these internal stories. I'm a loser. I'll never amount to anything. And then, I can do anything I set my mind to. Success in life starts with the quality of our internal dialogue. And yes, we get a lot of that from our families. That's why it takes a lot of courage to reprogram oneself. There's an online quote of particular relevance in this area of asserting that Black Lives Matter. Quote, "As soon as we are born, we are given a name, a religion, a nationality, and a race. We spend the rest of our lives defending that fictional identity." Think about it. As soon as we are born, we are given a name, a religion, a nationality, and a race. We spend the rest of our lives defending a fictional identity. Yes, indeed, there is a form that seems to come and go. There is a name attached to that form. The name acts as an anchor to which events attach, and this is called our personal story. Our lives are literally nothing but stories. What perpetuates that story? Memory. In extreme cases, if we have no memory, that is, if one is demented, then one is no longer cemented to others or the world. For those who do have functional memories, but have never considered it, this is what sadhus are attempting to do, as follows. Erase the deleterious effects of memory at all levels within the psyche, and be free to be who they are without the baggage of a past. This is why traditionally sadhus do not speak about their pre-monastic past life. They have undergone a ceremonial ritual, literally, to burn up their own past. But getting rid of the past is only half of the game. The other half is getting rid of the future. If we think that we have a lot of stories in the past, just wait until you examine the future. In that category, we fabricate hopes, dreams, fantasies, well-constructed edifices of how the future is going to unfold and everything we're going to do to ensure that that happens. These are all stories too. Sometimes they involve others, as in creating a new type of technology or a business, but largely they are private. So with sadhus, here's the situation. Ideally, they are living without a past and without a future. It is not necessarily that the memories have gone, but the need for reiterating them, the attachment to them, has been severed. The sadhu can look at his own story as just another in the human chain. His story remains in memory, but he does not milk it for any restimulation. Now he uses it only for information and turns to it only when necessary. Notice that the sadhus have eliminated one of the chain of time, space, and causation. Those three, that tripod, very important. When one of these three falls, the other fall also. Without time, that is, without the past and the present, then events simply arise. Things just happen. Jnanis, such as Nisargadatta, say, you are not a person. And my commentary on that is because a person is just a story, a chain of events seemingly linked to a name and a form. Swami Vivekananda approached the same situation in a different way. By criticizing the American fetish individual, he opened the window to the possibility of true freedom. Freedom to respond, to innovate, to become unrooted from the earth, but rooted in the boundless absolute. He and his brother disciples were unattached and they were open. All of this implies being in the present only. In the present is where spontaneity resides. One is able to respond immediately to situations as they arise, without being burdened by prior ways of doing things. And only in the present we find ourselves and God. The writer, Mark Matuzak, calls us Homo narens, that is, storytelling humans, and gives a perspective more suitable to non-monastics in this excerpt. Quote, as the self-story is worn away, the witness grows stronger in proportion. The witness is our reality check. In spiritual circles, it's commonly thought that story itself is an affliction, that our goal as truth seekers ought to be storylessness, Zen-like, just thisness, detachment from personal myths, as if we had no shape at all, no history, memories, dreams, or dramas. But is this really possible? Should we strive to transcend narrative, reject the storytelling imagination, and not enjoy being Homo narens? Of course not. Story goes hand in hand with survival. Story matters in the same way that having a body matters. Both help us navigate the physical world. Story is our vehicle, unquote. So, use it wisely. My corollary to Matuzak's piece is that it is hard to avoid the conclusion that the divine transcendent became the immanent human precisely for the sake of story. Now, newly minted human beings we call little kids. Have you ever noticed? Little kids imbue everything with consciousness. Their toys, pets, whatever they find in nature. Therefore, for them, everything can have a story. Their attitude was dubbed magical thinking, childish, something to be left behind as we mature. But look again. There is an arc to this story of consciousness nowadays. So I'm going to try and outline this arc. Originally, magical thinking among our primitive ancestors attributed natural effects to external forces or divine beings. People attempted to influence such deities with offerings, prayers, incantations, etc. The European churches in the Middle Ages and later used accusations of magical acts to eliminate suspected pagans or potential rivals or anyone suspected of not following the established way. Then the so-called Age of Enlightenment, again in Europe, led to the ascendancy of reason, ultimately to the complete detriment of a holistic worldview. This Cartesian view is still taught in our schools and permeates modern society. Hence, to our detriment, when we grow up, we lose our engagement with the world as a living thing. Being confined to cities does not help. In the last few centuries, where reason dominates, a certain type of magical thinking has rightly been categorized as a type of fallacious thinking. It is a common source of invalid causal inferences. That is the belief that unrelated events are causally connected despite the absence of any plausible causal link between them. We have ample evidence today of how prevalent this is in our political sphere. We see its operation daily in news reports about how the coronavirus is just going to go away or other such absurdities. In extreme cases of abnormal psychology, magical thinking is the conviction that one's thoughts, all by themselves, can bring about positive or negative effects, or that thinking something corresponds to doing it. Children frequently have this when children are having problems. This brings about guilt and other deleterious mental conditions. But wait. Today, after centuries of denigrating non-logical occurrences, and thanks to Carl Jung, we recognize that some events are just plainly inexplicable. The arc has bent back again, and now we have greater understanding. We call the simultaneous occurrence of events which appear significantly related but have no discernible causal connection, we call those synchronicity. Another word adds a further dimension, serendipity, that is the occurrence and development of events seemingly by chance, but in a happy or a beneficial way. The writer Lawrence Brock says, "You look for one thing, find something else, and realize that what you found is more suited to your needs than what you thought you were looking for." This has happened historically many times in scientific laboratories. For instance, the well-known thing about penicillin, that was just more or less discovered by accident. If you want to say there is an accident. Now here's a new age approach to this serendipity. Serendipity is the process of making happy discoveries as you go along. If you have a clear goal that you visualize continually, unexpected events and experiences happen, which help you to achieve your goals even faster. If you calmly and confidently believe in the magic of serendipity, no matter what happens, you will have repeated serendipitous experiences that will help you to achieve your real goals in life. Unquote from that New Age approach. The thing that I take a little bit of, it works, it unquestionably works, but I take a little bit of exception to the New Age approach is that they tend to confuse relative goals with absolute goals. So I'm going to give a counter to that from the Suzuki Roshi, the author of Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. If your mind is empty, he says, it is always open for everything. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the experts, there are few. You can think of serendipity as God's hand in your life. Don't look at things as mere coincidence, just blessings and life lessons that we need. We need to open ourselves to serendipity. As spiritual aspirants, we seek clarity. We need to create mental space to allow the unexpected to come in. Open up to the possibilities beyond imagination. Take note of how, on the other side, take note of how you are resistant or attempting to control what you experience. Distractions and expectations, both good and bad. Take note of those. Swamis Paramananda and Prabhavananda and many others ran their centers this way. Whatever was needed would just come. Hence, there was no real anxiety about it. Things just happen of their own accord. Our job is just to wonder what might be around the next bend. Or, as Buddhists say, we can acknowledge the turning of the wheel of Dharma and turn with it, not against it. Remember, you don't necessarily get what you want, but you get what you need. The magic of serendipity is the divine economy in action. That is, it benefits both the giver and the given, or whatever two parties are engaged in the transaction. I know of at least four non-monastic devotees who always live this way. They're really remarkable people. Ramakrishna was notably outrageously spontaneous. Also Neem Karoli Baba and others that we've heard of. There are many serendipitous events in Ramakrishna's life. When he needed to build a hut, the logs and the rope and whatever was needed floated up from the Ganges, and there it was, just what he needed to build the hut. Many such examples. Actually, I just want to mention, I've been reading, thanks to Swami Arupeshananda, who reminded me about this. Sister Deva Mata, who was in Paramananda's community, wrote a book, the original Sri Ramakrishna and His Disciples, which then Christopher Isherwood completely redid with the same title. But anyway, her book is full of stories that she acquired mostly from Shashi Maharaj, that is Swami Ramakrishnananda, but also other direct disciples and Holy Mother, because she knew them all personally. And she has a lot of like little tidbits in there of serendipitous things that happened to Ramakrishna or around people around Ramakrishna whenever he was in their vicinity. So Ramakrishna might say, concerning all the lives, the human lives, Mother, see all the stories she is creating, and each is unique. The final outcome is unavoidable. Yes, you can change the world because you are the world. If enough of us take action in that direction, it can and will happen. We need to become a critical mass. That is, if enough of us adopt an innovation in a social system, then the rate of adoption becomes self-sustaining and creates further growth. So if any of us are holding out hopes for a greener planet or a less violent planet or whatever, yes, we can do that. And I think people are finally getting that message. And in a way, someday we may thank the whole coronavirus for giving us the freedom to be able to move in these directions that hopefully will benefit society over time. So I have quite a few concluding remarks. Stories unite us only if we believe that we're divided to begin with. The truth is, there never was a separation. Stories have relative societal and personal value, but no ultimate value at all, because they are based in a conceptual framework that disappears when time, space, and causation are conquered. Just like the sadhu who has turned his back on his personal story, your story is the story of the entire universe. That is why I frequently talk about cosmology in my lectures. As humans, we have two births. In between, we have a story that is unique to us. We are characters in each other's stories. So when we die, our stories continue in others' memories. Now I'm going to refer to an interview with a physician by the name of Zach Bush, who I found online. And I'm going to have quite an extensive quote here, but he said this in reference to people dying alone in ICU units during this pandemic. And I hope he'll forgive me for using his words. I would have, if I had done the PowerPoint, I would have shown a little video clip. But here it goes. There is an innate drive in us to stay connected. That there are two births that happen to humankind. When we are born, we go through a forgetting of the magic that we are alive. And we forget that we are in an exquisite miracle of beauty every day. We are here for a transformative experience where we discover that we are not biologic. We are spiritual beings. We are light beings trapped in a biologic cell for a moment. We don't need a revolution. We need an evolution. We need to evolve past our fear. We need to find love. Love is an experience. The fabric of everything is beauty. In our reaction to seeing the beauty is love. Start witnessing the beauty, and you will experience the love. When we go back to normal, I hope it is not the old normal. When they say, go back to your normal activities, do not go back to your normal activities. Act much differently. See the beauty everywhere. Engage with beauty, and most of all with your fellow humanity, to realize a much different future. Unquote. Let us cherish, hold dear, and treasure this approach to life. As a species, let us move decisively from an I attitude to a we, devoid of tribalism, nationalism, and heterogeneity, to a we that includes all living beings on this spitball of a planet. Do we have announcements?
We don't have the next month's schedule yet, but I believe it continues with all our classes.
Okay, I guess they can check online for the July schedule. Okay, it hasn't been printed out here yet.
July 4th, there will be a program streamed from Trabuco.
Okay, did you all hear that? There will be our usual July 4th program will be very truncated. It'll be streamed, and the public is not invited, but it will be streamed and people can participate online.
We also have our members meeting coming up on 18th July,
Oh, right.
and members will be receiving a letter about that, how to join it. We're doing it online.
Right. There is a Zoom meeting of our annual membership meeting on July 18th at 10:30 a.m. And you will be sent links so that you can join online.
There was a question. Someone was wondering about that quote, Homo Narayan or something?
Narans.
Homo Narans, and who coined that term?
Mark Matuzak.
Mark Matuzak.
Yeah. Okay, for concluding today, I want to turn to the Sufis. They have a word for loss of self in the sense that we've been talking about this impermanent story person. And the word is fana. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. It means passing away, vanishing. And I have two short poems by Shabistari, a Sufi sage of the 13th century, from his book, The Secret Rose Garden. The first one is called The Gift. Then that moon, whose face shone like the sun, seeing I had cast hope away, filled a goblet of divine knowledge, and, passing to me, bade me drink, saying, with this wine, tasteless and odorless, wash away the writing on thy being's tablet. And next, not being is the mirror of absolute being. The universe became man, and man the universe. There is no clearer expression than this. When you see well into the creation of this act, he is the seer, the eye, and the seen. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Any further questions?
You have many thanks and appreciation.
Okay, Jai Ma.